Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Father Talks podcast. I am your host, Mike D. Today, I am joined by my guest, Ronald Platt. Ronald is a serial entrepreneur, foster parent, realtor, and founder of NASDF, the National Association for Single and Divorced Families. His work helps parents protect their children, stabilize their homes, and turn painful endings into stronger new beginnings. Ron, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you having me on.
Hey, I am excited to have you here. Listen, man, when I saw your profile, man, I'm like, you know what? We need to share more information like this because there's a lot of situations where people are going through, divorces, things like that, where, you know what, they could use some outside help. So I'm glad to, have you on the show. I'm gonna, try not to browbeat you with too many questions and whatnot. You know,
Bring it. I'm here.
hey, outstanding. I love it. Okay. So, actually, you know what? Give us a little bit of your background before we get started.
You want my business background, or you want the reason why I put NASDF together?
The reason why you put NASDF together.
Perfect. So I went through a really toxic relationship. I think many of us go into relationships based off of how we were raised. So if we
Yes.
were loved conditionally as a child, we're going to go into a conditionally loving relationship.
Okay.
And I had a high tolerance for pain, given that I was also brought up in an abusive household. So I really had to feel that I had to put up a lot to receive love, and that's how it was back then. So of course, when I get in my first relationship, that's what I match with, and I was with that person for 14 years.
Mm,
We had broken up twice. The second time I got back together, it was due to a health issue. When during that time that we had broken up, I actually that's the time that I became a foster parent. We were separated for about 2 years. I purchased another house. I took in my foster son. Really started having a good life. And if I hadn't received the phone call always saying, "Hey, I'm sick, and can we reconnect?" And then, of course, my need to take care of the person kicked back in, and stupidly, I went back, and it got even more toxic. That person developed a drug addiction, alcoholism, all this kind
gotcha.
of stuff. So when it broke up, the immediate thing that person did was go out and reach out and get an attorney. And then, of course, I had to hire an attorney for something that was very simple, like the distribution of our house, which I had purchased and I had spent well over $150,000 renovating.
Yeah.
And stupidly added that person to the deed. But I said, look, we'll sell the house. All the money that I've put into it, including the mortgage payments, we'll take out, and whatever's left, we'll split 50-50, which seemed reasonable. But then they went out and hired an attorney who said, no, we want $85,000 up front. And at the same time, the recession hit. So as a realtor, I went from making six figures to nothing, but my overhead was still at the six-figure level. Two cars in the garage, big house, all that kind of stuff. So the option of giving that person $85,000 wasn't an option. I said, let me sell the house and I'll be more than happy to give you the 85,000. Uh, what ended up happening is, and I still remember the numbers to this day. We listed the house for 990. They denied the offer for 990. We got an offer for 859. They denied that. We got an offer for 770, 650. And when it finally hit 590, my dad picked up the phone and threatened the person and said, if you don't sign, we're going to have issues. And because that's how frustrated my dad was with the whole thing, let alone with the amount of frustration I got. Basically, by the time we were done, the only thing that got paid off was the mortgage and my IRS debt. There was nothing left at the end because of
Right.
that. Because between what their attorney was charging and the amount of the times that they did not allow us to take higher bids and the economy going in the place it was, there was nothing left. So, but that was only part of it. It wasn't the financial aspect. It was the emotional aspect of getting rid of that toxic person and not having the resources to go to say, who do I go to? And then once the divorce, it wasn't a divorce because there was no marriage, but once the relationship ended, not having the resources for me to step into and say, hey, I could use some psychological help. I could use some relational help. I need to really sit down. And on top of my business having so many challenges and everything else, I'm having a hard time. I have to start from scratch. I've lost my business. I've lost money. I don't have money for food. I really need to start from scratch, and there were no resources. Then you take into account when I got my foster son and he needed services that were not being provided, or I put him in therapy that the Department of Children's was giving us, And he would come to me week after week saying, Dad, I can't keep going to a different therapist every week. And I'd call the
Right.
caseworker going, well, why is there a different person every week? And she'd say, well, we just can't keep them. We don't pay enough. We can't keep them. So of course, at that time, I was able to give him private care, but just the things that I saw as a foster parent that was being done to these children, or when I would take my son to school and he'd point out all the homeless kids that were
Right.
on the street that he knew, you can't unsee that once you see it. And I thought, how do I create an organization that is large enough that gives my voice? It's not just one person with a voice, it's millions of people with a voice that are advocating for the same thing so that we can make changes for these kids
Okay.
and advocate for foster care and family court reform. Well, in order to do that, I used AARP as my example because they have 36 million members and if Congress wants to make a change to Social Security and Medicare, they have to answer to AARP.
Right.
That's the voice I wanted to have. So that was my inspiration to put NASDF together, be able to provide people who are in the process of getting a divorce, have a single family type arrangement, or anybody who wants to join, be able to provide them with products, services, support, and resources such as free mental health care. We offer 3 free mental health care sessions with discounted sessions thereafter. We offer early childhood education discounts on enrollment and priority enrollment. We offer career services. So you have an at home mom who has this gap in her resume because
Mhm.
she's been an at-home mom. How do you fill that gap? Well, if you go to our career sources, we have like 25 different videos on how to make that look good on your resume, how to get in front of the recruiter, how to dress for success, how to update your LinkedIn, all these things that you need to either re-enter the job force or get a better job. And then if you still can't figure out what you want to do when you grow up, talk to one of the counselors on one-on-one. They're going to give us a 25% discount to talk to you. We have discounts for diapers and formulas and school supplies, computer supplies. We have financial planners, attorneys, divorce coaches. Anybody related to the divorce industry is one of our resources. Somebody said put together a divorce registry because you need everything when you get divorced. So through Fresh Starts, we now have a divorce registry. I call it the Costco effect. The bigger we get, the more retailers and people are going to come to us and say, I want to be able to give your people something at a cheaper cost than they can get if they went direct. For
Okay.
example, Aflac, we have an arrangement with them that they're offering us the same products that you can only get through your employers.
Mhm.
You can now get through us.
Wow.
So, for instance, they have I love this program. You've seen the duck on the commercials,
Yeah.
Aflac. So what they do is if you have we all have huge deductibles on our health insurance. If you purchase, they have a deductible buyback program that if you purchase it, they give you a certain percentage of those deductibles back in cash, right? But you can't get that unless you buy through your employer. If you come through us, you can purchase that product through Aflac. So there's a lot of opportunities. And oh, the real estate side, if you use one of our realtors that are in our network, which by the way is massive, it's all over the country, I'm going to give you 25% of the commission that we receive. So if let's say the selling agent gets a 3% commission at closing, I'm going to get 25% of that. And I'm going to give that back to my members to offset their closing costs.
Wow. Okay.
So we're talking about a four,
Mm.
five, six, $7,000 credit on your closing costs just by using one of our realtors. And if you don't like the one we sent you, we'll send you 2 others. So our
Right.
network is huge.
Right. Outstanding.
And then, yeah, and then on top of that, we have the only insurance product in the world that guarantees child support and alimony payments for up to a year. And
Okay.
it's called Support Insured. It took me 30 years to put that product together, and I finally found the right insurance company who wanted to be part of this. It says that if the person who's paying dies, becomes disabled, involuntarily loses their job, so let's say AI down, because of AI they lost their job, or if they're an entrepreneur and they have to close their business and declare business bankruptcy, we'll continue making those payments for up to a year to give you that ability to get back on your feet, get a job, and start making those payments again.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Okay. Before we go forward, and I'm going to ask you this a couple more times throughout the episode, where can they connect with you at?
So it's right there on the screen. NASDF.org is our website. And that you're going to see a tab on there for support insured on the right, but all the benefits, everything we provide, you can join right there. Like I said, it's only $19 a month. We try to make it as cheap as possible so that
Yeah.
everybody can afford it.
Okay.
And then you can also see us on all our social sites, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube under NASDFORG.
Okay. I'll make sure that when we air this episode, we add all those links and everything website, whole shebang, because I think this is really something important that people, you know what, it's a resource that would help a lot of people.
Yeah, and if you just listening to our podcast, your podcast, the
Yeah.
podcast interviews I've done, which is on our YouTube page or our Facebook page or Instagrams, you'll get it. It's just great resources about, what to do after you get a divorce. How do you have that talk with your kids? That getting back into the dating scene, don't make the same mistakes. I mean, a ton of information just off of our podcast interviews.
Outstanding. All right, so let me ask you a question. Okay, you're obviously you've been doing this for a while. So what does a what does a couple know? When this is more than a rough patch. They know that we are heading towards a divorce. This is no longer something that we can just work through. When you've been through this situation, what are common signs?
You're it, Mine was kind of unique because I thought I was going nuts. But I did not know that the person was doing drugs. So
Okay.
they hit it very well. So our conversations were, I really thought I was going crazy. And just to give you an example, I would say, so what I heard you say is the sky is blue, correct? He would say, the sky is blue. And I'd say, so what you're saying is the sky is blue. And they'd say, no, no, the sky is red. I'd say, no, but you just said the sky was blue. I never said that. And then I'd say, okay, so you said that this person was male, and he'd say, no, she's female, and I'd say, no, but you literally just said. So after a while, you're like, am I not hearing it correctly? So that was my scenario. And once I made the connection that they were doing drugs, and that was causing them to have these situations, it felt empowering for me, and I felt like an idiot at the time. But I think there's a lot of clues in a relationship. I always ask somebody. Let me start with this. I always say, is your relationship 80% good? Is
Okay.
it 70% good? Is it 40% good? When you get, for me, in my personal opinion, when you get past the 60% mark and it goes below that, you really need to take some strides in making it either better or calling it quits.
Right.
Because if you're working that hard and you can't say that 60 or 70% of my time is good, and I'm having challenges with the 30 or 40% that I need to work on, then that's the time that you possibly want to start looking into say, a relationship coach or a divorce coach. If you've decided at the point we need to get a divorce, but it's amicable, do you need to hire an attorney? Not necessarily. Sometimes you could go to a mediator, or sometimes you start with a divorce coach that says, here's the situation. This might be a better way of doing it. Whatever they do, the divorce coaches, they seem to be extremely good at it, and they seem to be able to bring a level um, of stability within the relationship that doesn't make it as harsh, especially when there's children in. So after you go through the divorce coaching, do you need the divorce? Do you need to move to a relationship coach? If that's not working, is the divorce amicable? Do we need to hire an attorney? Can a mediator take care of it? Certainly, the mediator would be a lot cheaper than hiring the attorney. Or can we file it ourselves? And there's a lot of online divorces that you can do now through AI and through divorce.com and a lot of other ones that are on our resource page, because we want to give you that option. If you don't have the financial means to actually get the divorce and it's amicable and you want to do it online, they give you from step 1 to step 10. Or do I need to hire the attorney? And then you go to our resource page and you'll find the attorneys there as well. So
I was going
I
to
want
ask
to
how
make sure that
often.
if you're getting to that point, do you need to get the divorce? Can you work it out? If you can't work it out, can it be amicable? If it can't be amicable, what do I need to do to move to the next step?
Yeah, I was going to ask you how many divorces do you see that are, amicable, and people get along to, you know, kind of work through the situation themselves.
Shockingly, the statistics are pretty good. It's
Really?
usually more like 40 to 60%. Yeah.
Oh,
Most people
okay.
are like, this just isn't working. I don't hate you, but it's not, it's not, especially during COVID, right? We were sitting at home with our partners realizing this ain't working anymore. I got to get a divorce. Um, and it's not necessarily because you're arguing a lot. It's because you just can't stand to see each other anymore. It's just not working. So how do we make this as easy as possible? And I think it gets tricky when there's a lot of finances involved and you haven't had that conversation
Yeah.
and you're trying to be amicable about it, but one party feels that they deserve more than the others. And that's usually when the conflict comes. Or if the person is a narcissist and, believes in controlling everything and not wanting to give you anything. I have one couple where the husband was verbally abusive and the wife just had enough. But he controlled all the finances, and when she went to file for divorce, she couldn't because she didn't have any money.
Mm.
And at the end, he made it as hard as could be. She finally was able to ask a friend to loan her some money to hire the attorney. And once that process started, uh, they were able to get the divorce, but he made it as difficult for her as possible. And that's when the conflict starts.
Right. Okay. So, all right, let's talk about the kids. Okay. Because ultimately, kids are usually the people who bear the brunt of, divorces, separations and that. When do, how should parents, you know, decide, how do parents tell their children that they're getting a divorce? Because I know, some people cannot do anything as a team,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
and instantly they become more of a bargaining chip. You got each parent trying to win the child over, but when is it the best time, or what's the best approach?
I don't think there's ever a good time or a bad
Okay.
time. I think it's don't keep them in the dark.
Right.
Most A lot of times the kids know that something's not working out because they've either heard the arguments or they've seen the tension between the two parties. Uh, I think the conversation should be how to have that conversation, not when, but how do you have that conversation? You don't want to make that child feel that they're responsible or that in any way that they're what they've done has created the discourse between the two parties.
Okay.
You want to make sure to sit them down and say, "Hey, it's just not working. Mom and I don't love each other, or dad and I don't love each other, or whatever the relationship is. This has nothing to do with you. You are, you know, perfect. You're our kid. Everything is great, but this just isn't working between your mom and I, and we're going to try to make this as amicable as possible. You're going to have two homes now versus one home. You're going to have stability at my house. You're going to have stability at her house, and you create that sort of confidence within your children that it's again, it's not their fault. This is
Right.
something between you and your spouse. And when you can create those tools, once the relationship does break, you try to create the same schedules in both households. You try to co-parent as best as you can. I think a lot of the conflict comes when you can't agree on the co-parenting part, or one parent feels that they have to, as you just said, overcompensate with toys and gifts and things of that nature because they don't have time, so they want to give the child something, and then the other party can't afford it, so the child suddenly begins to like one parent over the other, and you're causing that to happen, and you don't want that to happen.
Right. Yeah.
I
Because
said when my son was getting a divorce, him and his partner were arguing a lot, and it
yes,
became a high conflict situation. And I asked if they could both sit with me and talk, and I sat them down and said, "You've got a child. As much as you guys want to separate, you're going to know and see and be with each other the rest of that child's life."
exactly,
Right?
exactly.
So how can we work this out best for her and not for you? Right? Because it's all about her. At the time she was, I think, 4 years old. How do we make this best for her and not you? And they both really calmed down, and it changed the dynamic. They really sat down and realized that they have to uh, make this divorce amicable, and they have to co-parent as best they can. And they're doing it about it.
Right. Well,
Oh,
oh,
geez, I'm sorry about that.
yeah. Hey, no, it's all good. Hey, listen, this is part of, not being in studio. So things happen. It's all good.
I'm in downtown, so we get a lot of ambulances for some reason.
Nah, no problem. All right. So here's my next question. Also, trying to keep the kids out of the middle. How do parents, how would you recommend parents go about not putting adult pain on their children? You know, because divorce is hard enough. Separating is hard enough. I've only been married once, but I've been in several, bad relationships. And I always found that it was difficult to keep our personal issues out, you know, and it took me a while to learn that, what, to not even talk to my kids about their mom in a way. If I felt like I couldn't be open minded, or, what, give them some thoughtful advice without my personal feelings coming into it, I instantly said, "Hey, listen, I don't know if I can talk to you about this one right now." You know, so how do you recommend people, not put adult pain on their kids?
Get a therapist.
Okay, that's
You know,
reasonable.
that's who you should be having these discussions with. When my
Okay,
parents' divorce was actually very amicable, but at the beginning, I would go to my dad's house and he would talk about my mom, and I'd sit with my mom at dinner. I was living with my mom at the time, and she would talk about my dad, and she'd be crying because she was upset, and my dad would be yelling because he was upset. and it was a lot
Mhm.
of eco stuff going on. But to a point, and I was 16 at the time, I had a breakdown
Right.
where my mother and I had gotten into an argument over something really stupid, and I had a breakdown and ran into my room, and I had lost it. I had a lot of pressure on me, and she called my dad, and they both came over and they sat with me and said, "We apologize. Like, we should not be putting this burden on you. This is between us, and we're going to stop." And they made a decision that night to no longer speak badly about the other party. Now, long term, they became best friends,
Right.
remained in each other's lives amicably for many, many years. I introduced my dad to my stepmother. They
Okay.
got married. My stepmother's family was her ex-husband. My mom was my cousins, everybody. It was an odd family of, mixed and everything else because it worked well. So the reason why I say get a therapist, your children are not your therapist. And you
Right.
have to understand that you're talking about your co-parent, you're talking about their mother or their father, and you don't want to necessarily talk badly about that person.
Right.
If they're abusive or something like that, I'm not going to tell you how to have that conversation, but I'm telling you, if it's a divorce where you're having some conflict, that's not a discussion that you give off to your children, because you want that other party to still look good to It's still that person's mother. They're going to love and protect that mother and love and protect that father as best they can. And if
Right.
you start talking badly about that parent, it puts them in an odd spot. They don't know what to do. And then they're the ones that are going to need the therapy as well. So always try to speak, it's easier said than done, but always try to speak respectfully of the other party, or leave your children out of your personal issues with that person.
Right. Yeah, because I can tell you from personal experience, even with my stepson, we never, as he was growing up, his dad, he would go see his dad like every other weekend or whatnot. But if there was issues, my wife and I tried to always talk about those issues in private. Never have him hear us talking about it. Well, hey, this happened. But we had those discussions away from him because whatever opinions he was going to have of his dad, it was not going to be based on things that we said or to him or around him, you know? And not to mention for me personally, excuse me, with my ex, she had involved our girls in so much stuff that as they got older, you know, they felt like, what's the word I'm looking for? They felt entitled to explanations for things that really didn't involve children to
Mhm.
begin with, but their
Mhm.
mom involved them in it,
Mhm.
so, and that's water under the bridge now, but I think about things like that and listening to you, you know, this we more people need to make their kids their priority. And listen, relationships over. Us playing games, trying to do all these things to get back at the other person for something that happened 5 years ago, or you blame who's ever taking the blame for the divorce. You know, these are all irrelevant issues as far as it goes, as far as it relates to our kids.
Mhm.
So we don't like each other anymore. That is what it is.
I mean, your kids
Okay.
are going to be screwed up even if you have a happy marriage.
Yeah.
I always
Right.
say one college fund, one therapy fund, right? Because
Yeah.
well, somehow you're going to screw up.
Yeah, good. And, man, and it's crazy because there is like, so my stepson, he's dad now, and they're
I'm
reading all
sorry.
these books. Yeah, but he's reading all these books and that. I'm like, listen, buddy, none of these books are going to prepare you for anything. Your child is going to do 90% opposite of everything every book has ever told you. Okay,
Absolutely. Yeah,
so
for me, I took in a 13-year-old. So I mean, I
okay,
was naive in many ways. I kind of knew every play and everything else, but no, I had to. Yeah, I've got great stories to share, but I'm not going to share them on this format. But but I do remember one conversation. I was sitting around with my friends, none of who had children, and they were all sharing with me what I was doing wrong. And I'm listening very politely as each one of them tells their little spiel. And after they were done, I said, "Are you all done?" And they shook their heads, and I said, "How many people have kids here?" And nobody raised their. I said, "So basically, you're sharing how you were brought up, and you're trying to give me advice based off of your background, none of which is the same background that my son has had.
yes,
You have no idea what my son has gone through the last 13 years before I got him. So if I'm going to ask any parenting advice, I'm going to ask my sister who has two kids, two sons, because
okay,
she's the actual parent in this group, not you guys." And it was kind of funny because they all looked at each other. And I went, "No, I get it, but you're not the ones I'm coming to for parental advice."
yeah, yeah,
And
because you
there was
guys have
like I said, it was very naive in many ways about it
yeah, they've got parental opinions, but you can't take parental advice.
from people that have no kids.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and again, the things that I was dealing with, I mean, he went into the foster system at 9 years old. He was placed into two abusive foster homes. Then
Mhm.
this person that he was with said, "Oh, I'm going to keep you forever," and then changed his mind 6 months later. And then I come along and say, "I'm going to keep you forever." Of course, he's not going to believe me.
Right, 'cause already
So,
been through enough.
right. So there were a lot of he tested me and tested me and tested me, and I tell the story that at one point he ended up in jail. Um,
Mm,
he went to visit his mother, and she gave him drugs,
shit
and then did something really stupid that caused him to get uh, to be put in jail. And when I picked him up that night, I laced into him. I was sitting there driving home, and I'm screaming and yelling and banging on the steering wheel and saying, I'm trying to do everything I can. And you're a good kid, but you keep making these dumb mistakes. And I don't even remember what I said. But what my son told me years later was, when he saw me that mad, he realized at that point that I was in,
that you gave a shit.
that I gave a shit, and I was
That's
in. And
awesome.
he said, "You have no idea how that point changed my life."
Yeah, and it's and hearing that, it's funny because yeah, I'm a coach. Yeah, I coach football and, a couple other sports. I do a lot of, training with youth athletes, and most of the kids that I am the closest with are the ones I actually I follow up with and, like, I reprimand for things. If
Hmm.
I follow up with them and I'm like, "Hey, your mom told me, you're screwing up in school, so I'll see you at practice because we gonna fix this." You know? And it's crazy because, these guys, a lot of them, they're in college now, and, I just did an episode, a couple weeks well, yeah, about a week ago with some of my old football players, and one of them told me, he was like, "You were the only dad, I've really ever known." And that, I mean, it moved me because I'm thinking, "Wow, my kids are constantly complaining because I'm on them about stuff." He was happy that there was somebody who gave a shit enough to yell at him.
You have
So,
no idea how coaches what kind of impact coaches have on kids.
yeah,
Kind of like the guy in the army, the general in the army that's yelling at the troops, right? It's as much as you don't want to be yelled at, you respect that guy, and you learn how to take on responsibilities and everything else because you have that kind of discipline coming from that person. The person doesn't have to be your parent.
right. So,
So kudos to you as a coach
yeah.
for changing these kids' lives. It's amazing.
Yeah, I listen, I love it. I try to tell people there's nothing more gratifying than seeing a kid not be able to do something and then working with them for a little while and watching the improvement, how much they change, because it's not just it's not just confidence. It's just, how they carry themselves even, when they've improved on something or when they've had somebody, just follow up and say, "Hey man, I'm proud of you. You did a great job with such and such and
Mhm.
such." Or even, you know what? "Hey, we still got some work to do, but I see the work that you're doing."
Amen.
It's
Absolutely.
not
And here's the greatest advice that I can give uh, families is apologize to your kid when you're wrong.
yes.
It's
That has been a hard one for me as, because especially as a young father, I mean, there were no resources, and this is one of the reasons why I even started this podcast thing because there was just no place for me to get help or
mhm,
advice or,
mhm,
to learn certain things or how
mhm,
I handle certain situations, you know, and I did like most of us do. We treat our kids like our parents treated us. And my parents weren't abusive parents. My parents were just people who are their kids were seen, not heard.
right,
Hey, we put a roof over your head. You got, all the food you need, and you do what the hell we tell you.
right,
You know, doesn't mean that they didn't love us.
right,
Just
right.
different. It was just a different generation.
Different type of love. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, quick question. Well, not just a quick question. So, what made you create the support insured?
So my like I said, my dad is the one who came up with the idea.
Okay.
So we were doing so I was in the insurance business at the time, and we were doing product development. So people came to us with really off the wall type requests, like
Okay.
hole in one insurance. You're in a golf tournament, guy makes a hole in one, wins $1 million. Who pays that $1 million? Well, you can insure that, or we were able to insure. Keno games in Vegas. Somebody called me once from Asia for a cell phone warranty, which clearly is everybody knows about now, but back then it was something unique, and I was able to put together something. We were underwriters for Lloyd's. We were not under. We were brokers for Lloyd's of London, and Lloyd's does niche type products, so we were able to place a lot of these things. And my dad
Gotcha.
would walk in with it. with a different idea every day, and I'd be like, yeah, 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 okay, no, not that one. But then he walked in and said, I've been thinking about this for a while. I want to develop an insurance product that guarantees child support and alimony payments. And I thought, now that's brilliant. And I said, well, we have an association. Why don't we convert it over to an association that caters to people getting a divorce and single families? He said, that's brilliant. But he didn't want to start until he had the insurance product placed. And if I tell you that this man spent 30 years trying to place this product with insurance carriers, it really drove him nuts because not only did Lloyd's not want to do it, but we went to companies that wrote credit insurance, and this is a form of credit insurance. Like if you get a mortgage payment and if you become disabled, involuntarily lose your job, that company will continue making your mortgage payments for up to a year. So we thought, well, let's go to them. They're writing a similar product. They didn't want to do it. And unfortunately, he met his demise without having to place it. And it wasn't until I finally said, I can't wait to open up the association for this insurance product to be in place. There's so much of a need. There's 26 million people out there that have single family homes that don't have any products or services to support. There's 2 million people getting divorced every year that don't have any support. I got to open up the association. So
Right.
I mortgaged my house. I took out a bunch of credit card debt and I just did it. And then somebody came up to me who I've worked with over the years and said, did you ever place the insurance product? And I said, no. And he says, I have somebody I want you to meet. And it's a 70-year-old underwriter who gets on the phone with me and says, I've got my own insurance company and we only do very weird things. What do you got? And I told him, and he said, send me the information. 2 weeks later, calls me up and says, we'll do it. And I got to tell you, it was an incredibly emotional moment for me because I know how hard my dad tried, but it required me to start the association to get the attention from somebody that said, hey, this guy's legit. Let's go ahead and do this.
Right.
So, and it was set up exactly the way I wanted it, the way we wanted it set up, having the certain control, the exclusivity, nobody else can market this product but us, and it's written through the association. So, it took 30 years, but it's here and it's up and it's running and it's the reinsurance company's PT Prudential, which is part of the Prudential company. So you've got a big company reinsuring it. So we're good to go.
Okay. So, and if you don't want to get into this, it is perfectly fine, but it's a part of who you are and what you've done. So, what did and this refers to things with your son. What did raising an LGBTQ plus foster you know son teach you?
Mhm. So I'm a part of the LGBTQ community as well.
Right.
Um, I actually saw one of my friends. So I took a trip to LA to visit a friend, and he said, I get off the plane, he picks me up, and he says, "So I'm getting my foster son today. All our plans have changed. Do you want to come on this journey with me?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I'm a really easygoing guy. I'm like, there's a reason why this is happening. Of course I'll do it." And I saw the beautiful child that he was a big brother to for many years, and I saw what he was going through. And then they were celebrating his coming into the house by inviting other foster kids over and their families. And I just sat back and I watched. And I thought, I could do this. This is something that I want to do. And I had been a youth group advisor for many years prior to that. So I had worked with kids for a while. And I get back to Miami and I go to a networking event, and this woman gets up and says, I'm looking for single and coupled LGBTQ individuals to take on these LGBTQ kids. And I looked up at God and thought, okay, here's my calling. I raised my hand. We were the first group, and it was mostly the movers and shakers within our community that had always been advocates for equal rights and things like that. So we all took that first class, and each one of us. So they had mentioned to me that there was a kid that was homeless, had a great heart, had made some bad mistakes, and somehow that resonated with me. And I went up to the teacher and I said, "Can I meet this kid?" And they said, "Well, we can't have you meet him, but we can show you where he hangs out." So I went to where he hung out, and I met this woman, and she said, "Well, I can't show you who he is, but there's his boyfriend." And when I looked at the boyfriend, my son was sitting on the floor, and his boyfriend was sitting in a chair, and I got a glimpse of him, and I thought, I could do this.
Right.
So when I got my when I got my license, they said, "Here's your license. There's your kid." I was like, "Whoa! haven't even met this kid. Can I spend a couple of days with him?" And they're like, "Yeah, he's homeless. You got 24 hours." I'm like, "I need a little bit more than 24 hours before I bring somebody into my house." So he and I kind of hung out. I took him for breakfast. We went to the mall. We just got to know each other. And I took him by the house. I had a 2 bedroom, 1 bath house at the time, and the second bedroom was empty. I said, let's go get a bedroom set. He was like, "What?" I'm like, let's go pick out a bedroom set. He's like, "You're buying me a bedroom set?" I'm like, Do you see there's a bed? Not there's no bed here. So that was huge for him. And we decided mutually to give it a shot and see what it was like. And I can't say it was easy. I threw him out twice because he broke all the rules at both times. And the first time I came, his sister was in contact with me. His mother and his sister were in contact with me, and they were both very happy that he was with me. And his sister called and said, "Hey, he skipped school and he's smoking weed at the house." And we had rules around that. And I came home and he had a friend over. I asked his friend to leave. And after his friend left, he said, "What's up?" And I went into his room, took the suitcase out, and started throwing all his clothes into it. And he's yelling at me, like, "What are you doing?" I said, "You literally broke every rule that we had in this house." And I opened up the front door and I threw the suitcase out and said, "Get out of my house." And I slammed the door. And then I broke down crying, like hysterical, like, "Oh my God, I just killed. I mean, this kid I screwed him up even more. I just threw him out of the house," and reached out to the woman who ran the organization. She said, "Congratulations. He'll be back in 2 hours. I guarantee it." Like, good going, Dad. You, you showed him who the boss was.
Right. But
He'll be
no,
back in 2 hours.
some people will hear that and be absolutely mortified. Like, how could you do that? But listen, there are rules
There
for a
were.
reason. There
And
are
he
rules
showed
for
up
a reason.
2 hours later, knocking on my door, and I opened it. And he says, "Can I come in?" I sat him down. He said, "You said you'd never do that." And I said, "As long as you followed the rules."
Yes.
And you did. You literally broke every rule that I had established. This is your house. There's no lock on the refrigerator. You can have as much food. You have the entire house here. I take you to school every day, but you can't do that stuff, man. And he was good for about another 6 months, and I had to do it again. And then he learned the lesson, and what
Yeah, but
ended up
that's
happening to
key.
your question about what it was like. What ended up happening was the woman who ran the organization was this woman, Amy. And Amy said to us, "If you ever need a break, call me. I'll take care of the kid for, like a day or two or something like that while you guys have a break." So I had gotten back together with my ex. They were dealing with cancer at the time and they were getting treatments. I had sold the house that my son and I were living in. We moved into the small house while I was renovating this big house. My son comes home one day and says, "I quit school and I quit my job and I just want to sit home and smoke weed all day." And I thought that's not going to work. And I go into the other room and that person's in a fetal position. And so I called Amy and said, "Hey, I need a break." And she said,
Yes.
"Okay, I'll come by and pick up the kid." So that opportunity ended up becoming a 2-month venture because he got very comfortable at her house and she was tougher than I was. Like she walked in and said, "You're going to be drug tested every week. You cannot skip school." And and she had like ground rules. I called her the little Nazi because she was tough. And he did not know. He thought I was tough. She was even tougher, and he liked it. And he stayed. And then he came back to my house. And then he would call her and he'd go back to her house. And what we realized is we were co-parenting. We were unintentionally co-parenting, and we realized we needed to start having conversations about setting rules and making sure that both environments were equal and that he wasn't going to her to get one thing and coming back to me to get something else. It got
Right.
to such a point that years later, she adopted him as his mother and I adopted him as his father.
Outstanding.
And
I
he
love
took
that.
on both our last names and created a new last name for himself after the adoption.
Right.
So to this day, I was on the phone with her yesterday and we're comparing notes, and he would say to her, "Don't tell Dad." And she'd say, "No, we don't do that. We don't have that. We don't have secrets in our family." And same thing with me. And he's had, he has an addictive personality. He some mental issues that he hasn't dealt with as far as depression and stuff like that. And we pushed him to go to therapy, and he's been on and off with therapy. And now, of course, he got married and adopted a kid, which is our granddaughter. And now I don't care about him anymore. Just give me my granddaughter. But I'm
Right.
kidding. But but there have been he's 37 and there have been many ups and downs. It's never straight line with somebody with addictions. He's been in
So,
rehab, he's been in jail, he's had to get back on his feet. He has been clean and sober for about a year and a half now, and when he is clean and sober and he's focusing on his health, he's phenomenal.
right.
I mean, my kid's always phenomenal. I love him to
Yeah.
death. The
Yeah.
guy's
But that's good.
brilliant.
That's good
Phenomenal sense
parenting
of
and
humor.
persistence.
Yeah, but there have been many ups and downs, and it has been very challenging, but I wouldn't change it, because even if he was from my own blood, I could go through the same situation.
Yeah. All right. We're real quick. So, hey, ladies and gentlemen, for those listening right now, again, the website is NASDF.org. That is the National Association for Single and Divorced Families. Okay. I really want to keep reiterating this website because I want people who need the help and I want them to hear this story because hey, these resources were not there, for when I was younger and when I was going through. And I mean, granted, this is my only marriage, but previous relationships involved kids. I could have used some resources and some help. So I want to make sure that I'm probably going to mention this 2 or 3 more times. So,
And it's only $19 a month.
yep. So, all right, where were we? Um, okay, so let's talk a little bit more about parenting. You know, so how did how did fostering change? How you see fatherhood?
That's a good question. I did not want to make this, it was interesting when you're growing up and you have an abusive parent
Yeah.
and you go to your cousin's house and that parent is abusive and your father says to you one day, "Do you want me to be more like your uncle?" And when you
Hmm.
think about that as an adult, if because I asked him, I said, "Why'd you do this?" He said, "Well, I didn't know any better." And I said, "But you saw what our uncle was doing, and you said, 'Do you want me to be more like him?' So you did know what you were doing, and you chose not to change." And the reason why I say it's good to apologize to your kids because I did never got that apology from him. I was like, "Yeah, well, we didn't know any better." And mom's thing was, we didn't know any better, da, 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 which I don't think is an excuse. So the reason why I
No.
bring that up is when I became a foster parent, I did not want to foster. I did not want to be the parent that my parents were. I wanted to be better. And when my
Right.
sister got married and had 2 kids, she did not want to raise her children in a violent household. She said there has got to be a better way. And she did the hard work. And she's got 2 magnificent young adults now. One's 30, the other one's in his 20s. And they're successful, they're happy, they're well adjusted. I wanted to raise my son the same way. And even though he came with a lot of baggage, I knew I had to do extra work, that I had to really hone in on my skills, have a great deal of patience, be able to make it not about me, but about him,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So there's challenges with raising those foster kids because of what they come with. They come in a plastic bag with their clothes and nothing else.
Right. Well, here's the other thing too, is that men in general, first off, we already have a hard time expressing ourselves, you know, articulating how we feel. Sometimes we may be fearful about something, but it comes out like anger,
Hmm.
you know, and it, ju- we're generally not mad, but we're trying to express something to our kids, and we only know one way to express it, you know. So kudos to you, for doing the work, and continuing to, hey, you had a kid where, he had all these issues, and you still stuck with him, even though you had to kick him out a few times. You were there, and I think that's that'll be something he always remembers. That no matter what I did, as many times as I screwed up, my dad was still there. He still loved me. You know,
It's if every child that comes with their own story, and if whether I birthed this child or I didn't birth this child, it's still a child.
right?
When I was a youth group advisor, these kids were between the ages of 13 and 17. How do I influence those kids to make them feel comfortable coming to me, to talking to me about things they can't talk to their parents about? Well, just like you as a coach, how do you pass on that fatherly figure without it with giving them the type of love that they might not be receiving at their house? So I knew my kid's background. His father, they had a good life up until the time I think he was 7 or 8, and then his dad
Mhm.
got into drugs, and his mom became a drug addict, and everything began to fall apart. His mom had a master's degree, was successful. His father was doing really well. I don't know what changed, but they went from doing really well to becoming drug addicts and drug dealers. And he was picked up because he had spent a week not in school, and that somebody sent out Children and Family Services to check on it. He was home
Yeah.
taking care of his mother who had overdosed,
Holy shit.
and they put him in the foster system. But he had a great deal of love and respect for his parents, and that's why I kept that relationship going. I wanted to make sure at a certain point that he had reestablished a relationship with them.
Okay.
Even his mother called me, like I said, right after I got him, and she was crying. "I'm so happy he's with you. Please, do your best." Blah blah blah. His sister contacted me. I would see his sister. She would spend time. I wanted him to spend time with his sister, so I intentionally, said, "Go spend some time with her." Um, the dad I ended up meeting much later in his life. I think around 18 or 19, he called me up one time and said, "Hey, He was at a gay bar with his dad, playing pool." and he said, "Can you come down and join us?" And I thought,
Really?
this is odd. The man's not gay. Had an issue with my son being gay, and here we are at a gay bar playing pool. And I went and I met him, and he and I played a couple of rounds of pool, and he was a really cool guy who had really screwed up and knew that, but actually shook my hand and said, "Thank you for raising my kid in a way that I couldn't." So, and his mother the same way, like thanked me profusely for being able to take over as I did. But what was interesting is he still saw the toxicity that having them both in his life meant. He saw what conditional love looked like with his mother versus what we were giving him, which was unconditional love. And he saw when he went back to try to live with his parents that his father beat the crap out of him. And he ended up calling me up in the middle of the night, and I had to run out and get him. I mean, he was 18, or I think he was 18 or 17 at the time, and I ran out and got him again. And the how destroyed he was, that person, his dad, was still the same, but he knew that he had me, and that I was here to protect him, and I was here to get him. So yeah, it was definitely challenging, but I was there when his mother died. I was by her bedside with him. I was there
Mhm.
when his father died. I was by his bedside. In fact, Amy and I, my co-parent and I, ended up paying for his mother's funeral because they had no money. Um, because I wanted him to be there, and I made sure that he stayed at my house for 3 or 4 days so he could decompress, so he knew I was there for him. And yeah, it was a good experience. I mean, it was a good experience for him to be able to know that he had us there to support him.
I mean, hats off to you. And listen, thank you so much for coming on the show. Again, anything else that you want to share with the audience, that you feel is important that anybody going through a divorce period, the show is primarily, based around men, but if there's a woman out there listening that she just wants to, get some help, anything else you want
I
people's,
was on a I was on KTLA yesterday for Father's
okay,
Day, and they were saying what is it that men do that is different than how women handle certain things? And I said men don't ask for help. Their
thanks.
masculinity sometimes doesn't enable them to do it because they feel that they can fix it, they can chin up, they can make it work. That they're weak if they go for counseling, and therefore they end up having a high level of anxiety, depression. They're now having to support two households versus one household. They now have to be a single parent versus a co-parent, and they haven't had a lot of the challenges that they might have seen that their ex was taking care of now that they have to take care of.
Mhm.
So there's a huge amount of pressure out there for men. And when I was looking, a majority of the resources out there are catered to women.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
so how do I incorporate that into the association and make sure that I'm giving dual help for both parents? And we've been very intentional in making sure that if the therapist does not work with women, that we have an equal amount of therapists that work with men.
Okay.
That I have as many podcasts for men and dads and everything else that we have for women on there, that are the advice that we're giving is mutual for both parents, so that you can feel comfortable as a father saying, "Hey, I want to be able to come and get advice." And oh, by the way, those free mental health care sessions, those apply for you as well. In fact, as soon as we hit 5,000 members, it goes from 3 free mental health care sessions to 8 free mental health care sessions per condition. So if you have anxiety and depression, you're getting 16 free mental health care sessions. We're very anxious to get to that point. So please join, because the more members we have, the better it gets. I want to
Outstanding.
make sure that men say, okay, I can reach out and ask for help, or I can listen to my dad podcasts, or I can listen to Michael with his podcast, or whatever it is that's out there. Uh, you have the resources. So ask.
Yeah.
Because I'll
And
tell
there,
you something, once you ask and you get it off your chest, it's like this huge release. And you're like, why didn't I do this earlier?
yeah. And listen, man, we struggle. I have talked to so many guests, especially about, you know, my ability to deal with my emotions. I keep everything to myself, you know, like freaking hungry hippo. I just got all these marbles just all in here, because I I was raised that, we don't talk. If we got an issue, we deal with it ourselves and we keep it moving. You know, I want to be a space where, men do not have to continue to do that because in the end, it causes a lot of health issues. You know, it puts a lot of barriers up between you and your family. There are things going on that you may not, people don't even realize it's happening to you because
Mhm.
we don't talk.
Right.
So this is a good, phenomenal resource. And I want people to hear this and say, you know what, I can get some additional help. $20 a month. Jesus, you spend $20, on McDonald's.
Correct. You can't go anywhere
Yeah.
for a meal
Right.
without paying $20. Exactly.
Yeah. So your average meal a day nowadays costs you $20. You know, look at all the resources, and things that are available for $20 a month. You know,
I think
somebody
I added it
genuinely,
up. I think it's somewhere like almost 8 or $10,000 worth of benefits and services
yeah,
that you're getting for $20 a month.
that is crazy.
It is crazy. And
Nowhere
and remember, the more people we have that join, and I need you all to join, the more we have that are joining, the more benefits we can throw in there. I mean, it's a whole when we hit a certain level, I think 2,500 or 3,000 members, it's a whole other level of benefits that get better and better. There's a app called Family Wizard, which is a communication app. They've said when you have a certain amount of members, we can actually drop the price cheaper than if they went direct to us. So it just keeps growing, and people want to give us stuff once we hit a certain number. So that's why we're working so hard to hit that number.
outstanding. All right. Hey, so Ron, I'm gonna keep following up with you. If there's anything new that you want to share, please let me know. 'Cause I'd love to have you back on. We're gonna put all your all your links and everything on everything that we post in our on our Facebook page, on TikTok, on Instagram, all that. So because again, I'm really excited to hear that there's another organization out like this, that are helping both men and women, you know, and it's greatly appreciated. Kudos to the job that you've done with your son. You know, you know, again, we need more stand up people out there. So I love hearing this story. So,
Well, Michael, I
um,
appreciate your format. This is great.
hey,
I've listened to all your podcasts. I think what you're doing is phenomenal, and I appreciate
thank
the
you.
education you're giving to all of us.
Absolutely. Again, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ronald Platt. That website is NASDF.org. It will not hurt you to just look through the website. Look through the website, get the information. You know what? Even if you don't join right away, it's there. You know, and Ron seems like a pretty straightforward guy. You know, so take take the help, take the
Thank you.
help.
Absolutely.
So, Ron, thanks so much for being on the show.
I
It's been
appreciate
a
it.
pleasure.
You got it, sir. And thank you.
Have a good, have a great one. Thank you to Ronald Platt for joining Father Talks and reminding us that endings do not have to destroy us. They can become the ground where stronger fathers, better men, and healthier families are rebuilt. Divorce, co-parenting, and starting over can test a man in ways most people never see. But Ron's story shows that healing is possible when we lead with honesty, responsibility, and love. To every father listening, your presence still matters. Your growth still matters, and your children are still watching how you rise after life knocks the wind out of you. Keep working, dads.